Welcome to the Chute podcast with Jeff and Janna. This is our weekly venture into the world of small to medium-sized businesses and the entrepreneurial spirit that drives success.
So our goal here is to help you grow and to be the best you can be, both in business and personally. To do that, we identify and we discuss topics that will hopefully help you as you work to build a successful business.
We also interview business owners and executives. It's our hope that you may be able to gain insight on ways to help you be a better leader and provide a better culture for your people.
Our mission here is to help you pull the chute once a week to work on your business instead of always working in your business.
So we hope you find these discussions insightful, helpful, and useful.
And thanks for your support. We hope you enjoy today's podcast.
Well, welcome to the Pull the Chute podcast, everyone, with Jeff and Janna. We are here today. Just Janna and I are here today. So Janna, how are you? First of all, how are you doing?
I'm doing good.
Awesome.
Moving forward in this year. It's already March. It's crazy. It goes fast. They say it goes fast when you go older. Does that mean I'm older?
I think we both
I have to admit to that.
I know, right? It is kind of crazy with that thing. But hey, today we're going to talk, we've been talking a couple times just about overall leadership and this new landscape of leadership and what that means and all the different pieces of what it means to be a leader. And today, Jen and I, we really got into this conversation just off mic the last time her and I were just talking about effective communication in this new leadership landscape. And so we want to spend a little bit of time talking about that today. So Janna, why don't you kick us off with what some of your thoughts are of effective communication and what it means to be a leader and to communicate?
Well, so I think what has changed quite a bit in the last, let's say, decade is that leadership is no longer about one, sort of patriarchal role or one king, as it were, and a bunch of little knights and minions and such. It really needs to become about teamwork, about the leader being a very active listener and an excellent communicator, because we now have, 4 generations in the workplace. So it's not only just understanding how to actively listen and then react in a way that engages and encourages your team, but it's also understanding language differences and how the different people in your team or within that team communicate. It has changed quite a bit. And so I think you've got to understand and accept that there's quite a variety of ways to communicate back to your team or initially communicate with your team. So I want to touch on that a little bit. And I know in your book, your newest book, Jeff, you talk a lot about, understanding communication, effective communication, active communication, and then how to respond. And I think we have to address this if we're going to encourage our leaders, our new leaders, the new way of leading. We have to really address what some of these elements are in the new way to lead a really successful team or a company.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with that opening statement more, Janna. I really appreciate that. And I think there's a couple things I want to do a deeper dive into. And, first of all, being a leader, it's changed, right? So as you identified, we need to be a good listener and just take the time to just actively listen to people. It's hard sometimes because when people say things, you want to refute back right away, or you want to have some kind of comment back right away. And in business, and I always say in your marriage too, being a good listener kind of helps things work better because the other person really wants to get their thoughts out. And here's the problem: if you don't take the time to be a good listener, and you start jumping in, and you think that you're adding good conversation or good comments to the conversation, what's happening is you're cutting that person off and they're not hearing what you're saying anyway, because they know that they want to get something else out.
Right.
And I think that's the key, right? That's what it means to be an active listener. It's like, let them just get what's on their chest off and get out and take notes or whatever you got to do. But
that's exactly right. So the way you can train your mind to do that. So the interesting thing about that, I've studied this a lot, being a communication person. Listening, what we're doing is we're absorbing the information, and our brain oftentimes is immediately, like you said, coming up with a solution, a comment, an agreement, whatever it is. The way the brain is wired is to immediately respond. That has to go, again, that goes back to our fight, flight, or freeze mechanism. It's just like we want to commune. We want to be part of that energy, that back and forth response. What you've got to do is understand that the way the brain works, it's going to want to respond immediately. So the best way to sort of learn to train your brain to slow down, absorb the information, is to go back to that sort of technical listening. And I address it in my book. It's the listening where you put it in like almost like a bullet format in your brain. So if you want to respond to the first 3 or 4 comments that somebody says, you sort of it's almost like you store that in your brain as bullet number 1. And again, it takes a little bit of practice to learn how to do this, Jeff. It really does. But in the long run, it's so effective. Then they continue to say something to you, and you bullet point number 2. This is how I want to respond. Make it short. And here's the beauty about making it short. We now, having 4 generations in the workplace, the best way to communicate is with transparency, with effective, right down to the bullet point, the wire. Don't address things with too much emotion. Don't address things with too much colored language that might be generational to you, but not to a coworker if they're, significantly younger. All of those kinds of things. If you can address those bullet points in just a very clean, concise, and clear way, the language and the dialogue is going to go much smoother, and the conversation is going to move forward to how can we resolve, or what is the next step. So it's kind of training your little brain to rethink things and to compartmentalize and bullet the points that you want to talk about.
Absolutely. And great advice. And then to add on to that, in my opinion, once you start doing that, people will notice that, and they'll feel much better about sharing things or offering ideas, right? Because you're listening, and then you're allowing them to get out what they want to get out. And I think that's a great way to build morale within your company, within your business.
Absolutely, it is.
I mean, it's one of the things, it takes a little work, like you said. You got to get yourself to figure that out. But
yeah, in a way you can also sort of support them as say, what I'm hearing you say, or what I think you're saying is, and then bullet these things so that they feel like not only you're listening, but they feel like you're getting the information in a correct way. Like you're not skewing it. You're not making it, however you want to spin it. You're being very clear. This is what I think you're saying to me. Now let's figure out a resolution, or now let's come up with some discussion with the team or whatever as to how we can all move the needle forward, kind of in a group setting or in a good way. And even if it's one-on-one, still, you're respecting that person's position, you're responding, and then there's opportunity for open dialogue to then have some kind of resolution with it.
Right. And I want to reemphasize what you just said, because it's really important. So for our listeners out there, say to them, I think this is what I heard you say. Yes. Because it clears the air, because maybe you misinterpreted something, or maybe you didn't understand how they were saying it, but it allows them to clarify better. But then you're both on the same page, which is going to make the conversation much better, because you might go off on a tangent and they might be going, that wasn't what I meant at all.
Exactly.
So being able
and what's interesting, Jeff, is it also teaches you as the leader how this person communicates. The most important thing for a leader is to understand their team, and to understand that somebody might communicate very succinctly. Somebody might be what I call oftentimes is a long talker. They want to explain and over explain, and that's okay. That's the way they verbalize. So the more you can kind of subconsciously absorb how your team communicates, the better going to be in taking all these team members and kind of getting to what the necessary points are, or what the direction of the conversation it needs to move forward in going. You know what I mean? Because you let's face it, as a leader, you are sort of driving that. You know what I mean? And you want to make sure that you continue to sort of take control of that, but you have to do it in a very respectful way, in a way where you understand other people's methods of communicating.
Well, and I think, taking that to the next step then, which is, the feedback part of it, right? So we talked about being a good listener, but then it's how you respond to what they said, right? And I think that's that's the next step in this, which is, sometimes some comments they make might affect you personally. You might feel bad about it, but don't take it personally. It's just them trying to communicate, and maybe they're not quite sure how to get out what they want to say. So keep that in mind when you're talking to them, and try not to take things personally. What I always tell people is understand where you want to get to, have a goal and say, okay, they just said all this, and in your head, take a moment and just say, okay, I think ultimately we want to get to this place. And how do we do that positively, not pointing out flaws and being negative about things, not accusing them of, well, you did this and you did that. because that never works in any kind of argument, does it?
No.
And just kind of stating, okay, this is what we tried. It didn't work. No fault of either. It's something we tried, right? So how about if we tried this, or what if we tried that? And just staying positive, I think, is the next step in the feedback. Is when you do it, because we're so used to, again, responding with, well, you did this, and you
Right.
did that, right? And that gets us nowhere other than them getting defensive and takes it nowhere. And what we're doing, our goal as a leader is to kind of build them up and to support them and to help them feel appreciated in the conversation. So keeping it more in a positive area than in the pointing out flaws area, I think is critical when we're doing that.
I think so too. And it's also understanding that you want all of your team to feel free to communicate.
Right.
So if you have team members that don't necessarily like to verbalize, or they don't like to contribute, your responsibility as the soft leader, again, as the supportive leader and the leader that's encouraging, is to figure out ways to make them feel comfortable enough to where they will contribute. They will learn to communicate within the team or in the group. And so I always say, when I'm coaching people, I'll say at the end of a big powwow, or let's say some kind of a team thing that you're doing, where you're talking about issues and you're talking about resolving issues or solving problems within the business or the team group, make sure that you let everybody talk and encourage everybody to talk and say, look, I really want to hear from every one of you, because you all have a different perspective. You're all coming to the table with different experiences, with whatever we're working on. So please don't be afraid or don't feel shy about communicating. We all want to hear from everybody. Everybody has value here. And what that also does is that sort of encourages our introverts and our people that don't like to speak much, whatever role they're in, it encourages them to feel confident to start to communicate within the group too. Okay, I can't, Jeff, where'd you go?
I'm here. Sorry about that. I agree with that. And it's a side of that really makes a big difference. Is the part of what we call empathy, right? So as a leader,
yes,
if you show the empathy to these guys, they're really going to feel that you were effective as a leader, and that you're showing that. And the next step of that too, for me, is transparency. Like,
absolutely.
talking, quit playing games. Don't just be transparent about where you want them to go. And I think it's a huge piece. And I'm telling you, transparency is a big factor when you're talking, because people will feel that you're genuine then.
Yes.
Right. And when you're genuine, again, they're going to feel like they're being heard and they're being listened to by everyone. So I would encourage everyone in your team to be, not only have empathy, but be transparent about what they're talking about, and not worry about how it's going to affect things or if they said something wrong, because this is all about talking about things positively and working through the situation and being able to get everyone, as you said, get everyone to talk and hear their side of things. Because, as a leader, we have to remember that we don't have all the answers, and we shouldn't have to have all the answers. That was
right.
the 1980s and 1990s, where if
That's
you were
right.
a leader, you had to be the expert. You had to have all the answers. That's not the case now. And we need to realize that as we're going through this whole process, that it's okay to not have all the answers and to ask other people for their opinion, their thoughts, and their ideas.
And it's something that we tapped into a little bit earlier when we were talking at one of the podcasts, where we talked about sometimes the younger generations, as much as we tease about, the Gen Zers and the millennials and this and that, and the millennials tease about the baby boomers and the Gen Xers, sometimes there is a faster, better, more efficient way to do things. And we have to be open to everybody's experience is a little bit different. And so sometimes there is a better way. Mm-hmm. The other thing I want to make sure that I mention before we get too far on it is what you just talked about, Jeff, when you talk about this transparency and this empathy and everybody connecting. Do know that communication is over 70% nonverbal. So any time that you can truly, with authenticity and with heart and soul, I talk about that, the five senses, and that heart, soul, kind of empathetic center is the most important in communication. It's not the words. It's not even the eyes, even though the eyes are the most important. It is this connection this true electric energy that happens when two people are sort of on the same wavelength and they're talking about something that they're both passionate about. It is very tangible. That electric energy is very tangible. And the more you can tap into being a real communicator where you really do show that you care, the more your coworkers and your team members are going to feel it. It is real. If you're BSing the
Yep.
situation, or you're trying to be king of the castle, they're going to feel that and they're going to
Yep.
shut down. That energy is important to understand that it's real.
Yeah. Well, and it's important too as a leader now. So, we're giving you ideas and thoughts that we have about effective communication, but we want to emphasize that there's going to be barriers that you're going to have to deal with to get to this place, right? Cultural differences, as Janna has talked about, personal biases, hierarchical structure, you're the manager and, you're the leader and maybe they feel like they can't communicate. So it's important that you work through those barriers so that you can make sure that everyone knows it, but realize there are going to be those barriers, right?
Yeah.
And so you got to be a little more sensitive and practice your self-awareness. That's going to really help, and try to mitigate biases and, flatten that hierarchical structure, whatever your org chart is, and make it so that people feel more encouraged to communicate. So I think those are things, just be aware that you're going to run into those kind of situations.
Well, and that's your job as a leader, is to understand that those elements will be there and to figure out ways around them. That's your job as the leader, as we say. So yeah, it's important. And the great news is when everybody feels respected and heard, that team is going to be so much stronger in production or whatever, productivity and whatever your responsibility is
Right.
as the team.
So
So
I want to encourage you. So this is we're going to move on, keep moving through the process here, but we live in the technology world, right? And so there are multiple ways to communicate. There's obviously verbal communication, there is nonverbal communication, and then in the tech world, there's texting and there's chatting, there's emails and things of that nature. I want to encourage our leaders that are out there listening to this to not rely so much on the technical side of things for long-winded responses. To try to, if it's going to be more than a paragraph or two that you're responding, pick up the phone, have a conversation with these people.
yes.
Because, when we run into, and Jan and I have talked about this several times, when you send an email or you send a text, people can't hear your voice. They can't hear the voice inflections. They can't tell if you're being sincere or if you're being kind of chippy about things, right? And so they can take that all wrong, and it can cause so much distractions with things. I would love to just, encourage you guys to not rely on, communication for email and chats is all about quick little hits. Emails, especially, you can do a little of announcement, but if it's going to be, again, more than a couple of paragraphs, call a team meeting and do it that way. Try not to use emails for all of that kind of stuff, because it really is going to make some people, when you send an email, people will dissect that email and say, what did they mean here? And look at, they use this word there, and you didn't mean that. But, because that's how people's brains work. It just kind of happens to do that. So I want to encourage you to do that. Janna, what are your thoughts on technology?
Well, I definitely agree. And this is one of the things this is a big chapter in my book. Truly, I always say your first responsibility is to meet face to face, because nonverbal communication, because of all the inflection of what the voice brings, what the eyes bring, what that soul, that heart center brings. So first and foremost, if you can, now here's the trick to that. You don't want to have meeting after meeting after meeting. The meeting, I always say, if a meeting should be no longer than 30 minutes, and you should have an agenda, period. But if it's something that is big, that's taxing, that involves more than 2 or 3 people on the team, call a meeting. Make it fun, make it quick. Start with an icebreaker. Hey, what are you guys doing this weekend? Hey, what do you do over spring break? Anything that's going to put them at ease that this is a discussion meeting, and then get to those bullet points. Number 2, make a phone call, like you said, Jeff, because the voice inflection is, again, one of our tangible senses where we can hear inflection. We know when something is serious, when you're joking, what's a big ticket item by the way you verbalize it on the phone, and you're getting that voice to voice connection. Then if you do write an email, that's fine, but make the email succinct. Don't make it narrative. Don't go on paragraph after paragraph after paragraph. Make it like you would want to verbalize it from face to face, which is, here's my main topic. Here are my 3 to 5 bullet points. Here's another main topic. Here are my 3 to 5 bullet points, and on and on. And lastly is texting. Very, very lastly is texting. And here's what I tell my clients. If you're going to text them, say, hey, I need you to do 1, 2, 3, but call me if you have questions. Pick up the phone and call me if you have questions. Let's have a dialogue about it. Open it back up to them so that they're reading this short text and they're thinking, holy crap, I have no idea what she's talking about or he means. Pick up the phone. Make that comfortable for them to read, where they say, oh, okay, I can pick up the phone and talk to my leader, or I talk to my coworker about it. So that really is that chain. First, first face to face, second, phone call, third, email, but very succinct, and then fourth, the text or the chat or whatever. That's really the order of communication. We need that connection among each other to really thrive and to feel comfortable to express.
Absolutely. And, I'm going to jump on to one thing that you said here, because we're running out of time a little bit, but, and I think it's really important. When you start a meeting, when you're meeting with someone, and this has to go with communications, don't jump right into the meeting.
Yeah.
Just ask people how their day was, how they're doing, whatever it is, so that, as you said, Janna, so they kind of take their guard down a little bit. I think that is so important. So as a leader, when people walk into your office and there's an agenda, just sit them down and go, say, how you doing, first of all? And just kind of, it gets them a chance to take a breath, right? Because maybe they got something really important on their mind, but it kind of, as you said, it kind of takes away that edge that maybe is going on. It just kind of lowers their guards a little bit. And I think that's so important. I coach that all the time with people, and really it makes a huge difference. So, I'd love to encourage you guys to do that as well. So any final thoughts here, Janna, from your side? I think this was a great topic.
I do too. And I love to talk about this stuff because I think it's important as we move into all kinds of cultural and generational and all of that, even regional differences. Jeff, you and I've talked about like the West Coast versus the East Coast versus Chicago versus the South, where we all talk with diphthongs down here. But no, truthfully, you need to know about your team members as a leader. You need to understand who they are first as people, as human beings.
Absolutely.
And then you can dig into the guts and the gore of the business. Yep. But your responsibility is to understand their communication style and to make it an open forum, to make it comfortable for them to be able to express their feelings when they're in a work environment.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, thanks so much, Jen. I'm so glad that we talked about this. For our listeners out there, we hope that this encourages you to look at leadership in a different way, to communicate better, and to really think about not only being a good listener, but what your responses are, how to respond, and the best way to communicate, because we just feel it's so important from a leadership standpoint. So this is our third leadership, just the two of us talking through things. We hope that you're finding this series something that you can leverage and use. And we're excited to be able to do this for you. So until the next time that we get together, we hope that you stay healthy and stay safe. Be good. Take care.